Welcome to the Dynasty Academy. Michael Washington. Mark is being a pompous ass before we came on air, and Mark Ongst.
I mean, you are. I'm not. I mean, you are.
Eli Manuel.
Why would you draft a wide receiver, dude?
Eli, you can cut this out.
You could leave it in, too.
Restart.
Kyler Murray has a fantastic arm. It's just the decision-making for him, for me. Michael Vick just made better decisions, I feel like, overall.
Makes sense. I said 1 or 2 inches, growing 1 or 2 inches, and you're like...
And he's still going,
I have leagues on too many apps. I don't know what to follow.
Welcome to the Dynasty Academy. We're back with an episode. Started a little bit late today. Family stuff kind of took over here as we grow into the summer with school getting out and whatnot. I'm Michael Washington. He's Mark Onks. First and foremost, I want to give a quick shout out to the Shady Sports Network for allowing us again this beautiful opportunity to stream on your channel, and for Shady Sports and Sam giving us an opportunity to use the platform on YouTube as well for various different things, but primarily for our Dynasty Academy here. Mark, first and foremost, how you doing, my man? How are things on your end?
I'm good. Starting to get hot here, so that means pool time.
Yeah,
anytime. The best time.
Of course, swimming is always the best, for sure. Yeah, man, it's crazy off season. We did some pre-rookie stuff, pre-draft stuff. We talked about the quarterbacks, did our rankings there. We said we would revisit it, and it sounds like that's the plan for today. It sounds like we're going to revisit our top. We're going to do top 24 because we're adding rookies instead of just shuffling things and whatnot. So we did our top 20, I believe, the first time, right?
Yes.
Top 20.
Yeah, 20.
We're going to run down what our top 20 is for anybody who was listening that tuned into our first show to give you an idea what it was pre-draft. This was like, what, in March we did this?
Or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it was like March.
Before we get into that, did you see the news today about Trevor Lawrence?
Yeah, so Trevor Lawrence, well, I was going to say Trevor Lawrence got the deal. Honestly, I think it's a great deal for Trevor Lawrence. I got into it with somebody already on X, believe it or not, that was like, oh, all that money for an average quarterback. And I'm like, what makes him average? What makes him average?
Well, it's one of those things where I feel like everybody needs you to be Mahomes, and when you're not, they just want to throw you to the wayside. Like I know Daniel Jones hasn't been the greatest. I know how people feel about Dak, but I also go, well, who else are you going to get as your quarterback? Because when you're not in the top of the draft, sometimes finding quarterback isn't, you're throwing darts. So I always try and caution people, just because your quarterback hasn't been the best doesn't mean you just need to go find someone else. Develop them. Maybe it's the coaching. Maybe it's the players around them. Like Daniel Jones has not had a wide receiver group that has been any good whatsoever his entire time. Dak had a great season last year, but they can't seem to win in the playoffs. Is that Dak? Is that coaching? Is that the team? Who knows? But again, who are you going to get? You're going to go get J.J. McCarthy to go win you a title? Because that's what Minnesota's trying to do instead of re-signing Kirk Cousins. And we'll see how that works out. Maybe it's Sam Darnold. I don't know. But that's what they decided to do. So good quarterbacks aren't usually just lying around for you to pick up to bring on your team. Tom Brady doesn't leave his team that he's been with for 18 years to go to Tampa and win you a Super Bowl. You don't just trade for Stafford and switch quarterbacks. That stuff doesn't happen very often.
Right.
So these people who just want to throw their quarterbacks to the wayside, and it's the same thing with Trevor Lawrence. Oh, he hasn't been great. He hasn't been this. He hasn't been that. I mean, sure, last year wasn't great, but a lot of injuries. So, how can you look at him and say, well, this is all your fault? Partially your fault for forcing yourself to go out there and play because you should have just taken some time off. But at least it shows the mentality that he wants to go out there and help his team win. So
yeah,
I'll take that over, dare I say, Lamar Jackson deciding to not play at all, and so
Yeah, no, and that's one of the things that's always tricky with quarterbacks as well. Like, in Trevor Lawrence for me, he threw for over 4,000 yards last year. The touchdowns weren't there. He only threw for 21 last year, but he was hurt for a good chunk of the year and was trying to hero ball his way through it. And I think that obviously played a factor into what it was. We discussed that, on the show beforehand too. It's just more or less the fact of how do you rank his contract and what he got in fantasy terms, right? Does the long term deal increase his value? Does it's one of those things where that they're not going to go find somebody? Does it change anything? That's the question. Like if you're a dynasty player or a C2C player or a camp Devi player, does that change anything, especially in the sense when you're using Devi rankings to rank with these guys as well, right? Like that's ultimately what it boils down to. Do these contracts change anything for you? And that's one of the big things that a lot of people I think take into factor when it comes to stuff like this. But for Trevor Lawrence's side of things, I think it's well deserved. I think that I expect him to have a pretty decent year, in my opinion. I think it's going to be much better than it was last year, as long as he doesn't try to play hero ball.
Yeah, I mean they bring in Brian Thomas. You have Kirk. You have Gabe Davis. Like they put weapons around him. You still have ETN. You have Tank Bigsby. You have Evan Ingram is still there. The defense, I think, got better. So he needs to realize he doesn't have to be the guy and let the rest of the team play well around him and just play football. Just have fun.
Yeah, I like the Brian Thomas signing. I know there was a lot of talk about the Gabe Davis signing, but I think Brian Thomas is a key factor with that signing as well for Jacksonville moving forward. I think it's a great signing, and like you said, Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne are both there. Evan Ingram's back, so it should be hopefully a good season for him, and he can kind of quell a little bit of the talk about him not deserving it. Okay. Here's the big thing. Let's recap first. Your top 20 from last week, March, or this past March, or whatever you want to say. The last show that we talked about quarterback rankings, pre-rookies, pre-draft. Go give us your top 20 real quick.
So it was Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and C.J. Stroud were the top 5.
Mm-hmm.
Lamar, Hurts, Trevor Lawrence, Dak, and Love round out the top 10. Purdy, Anthony Richardson, Justin Fields, Tua, Jared Goff were the next 5 to the top 15, and then it was Kyler, Deshaun, Baker, Kirk, and Will Levis were the final 5 for my rankings. They kind of broke out. A lot of it was age was a factor for a lot of those guys near the bottom being where they were. Just not knowing. It's Kirk Cousins. We didn't know where he would be.
Right.
Now. So Deshaun, we don't know what he's going to be. So that's those guys kind of, and then Kyler. He's 5'8". So.
Yeah, my top 20 were Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Justin Herbert were my top 5. Trevor Lawrence, C.J. Stroud, Jalen Hurts, Jordan Love, and Dak Prescott were rounded up my top 10. Anthony Richardson, Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, Justin Fields, Deshaun Watson were my next 5 for the top 15. And then I had Kyler Murray, Bryce Young, Tua, Baker, and Stafford to round out my top 20. Needless to say, some of that has definitely changed. Some of that has definitely changed. For sure.
Changed.
So we added rookies. We added 5 rookies to the equation. So somebody got knocked off our top 20. So we're going to do a top 24 this time, and discussions to see. Some people have moved. Now, you said pre-show that your top 12 did not change. Am I correct on that?
Did not change. Correct.
So your top 12 didn't change. Mine did. I put Anthony Richardson and Jared Goff. I moved them up ahead of Dak in this situation. And primarily the reason I did this was because Dallas did not have a good offseason. Dallas did not go all in as they said that they were going to. And I don't know what this receiving core is going to look like moving forward. Brandon Cooks isn't the same Brandon Cooks that was going for 1,000 yards with whatever team that he was on CeeDee Lamb looks fantastic, obviously, but you can't just continue to hit him with volume. And we don't know what their third receiver looks like with Jalen Tolbert. The tight end room is suspect. Peyton Hendershot, and then Jake Ferguson, and then it's just a bunch of who's who. They signed Zeke. They let Tony Pollard walk. They have Deuce Vaughn trying out at wide receiver. Like, it's just a bunch of kind of just like, it feels like the replacements. And I know it's not, because these guys have been there, but behind CeeDee Lamb, it's really a cluster of what are we going to get? What are we going to see? So for me, I dropped Dak down. And on top of that, there has been some grumblings that is Dak going to be the future of this team moving forward? So do they pull the trigger and maybe try to give Trey Lance the run if Dak struggles at all? Dak has put up some sensational years. It's just we're getting into that territory of, is he the guy?
Yeah, I mean, for me, whether he re-signs with the Cowboys or not, somebody will sign him then. So I don't worry about his dynasty value in that aspect. And I mean, last year, the only other wide receiver they had was Michael Gallup. It's not like they lost some amazing wide receiver. I like Michael Gallup, but, he was another one, kind of like a Jalen Tolbert, where a lot of upside, we a lot of belief that he would turn into something and never did. So I don't look at their offseason as a bad thing that they didn't go out and spend a ton of money or pick up guys. I just, they kind of kept it status quo. I don't remember if they really lost anybody on the O-line. That's the only thing.
Tyron Smith, I believe, the big guy. I don't
Yeah.
think he's there anymore. So
I don't think so either, but he was also 50 years old. So
it's not that they went out and didn't spend a bunch of money to win now or anything like that. It's, what is the future assets, right? Like, you paid Dak, not too long ago. You have to pay CeeDee Lamb now. We saw the contract that Justin Jefferson had. CeeDee's numbers are very, very similar. So you have to realize that you're going to be trying to look in that ballpark for that contract. Outside of CeeDee Lamb, what are these future assets going to be? And if Dak is going to be the quarterback of the future, you didn't do a very good job in a very deep wide receiving class to add any kind of future weapon. Jalen Tolbert, sure. I mean, I like Jalen Tolbert. I liked him coming out of USA. Question becomes, is he ever going to get to that point? Gallup had a 1,000-yard season in 2019. Then he battled injuries, and we didn't see anything from him ever again. He's now gone. He's with the Raiders. Brandon Cooks is older. I mean, he's getting older. That speed is still there, but Brandon Cooks has never been a guy that you're going to invest in long term anyways. That's why he's been on 87 different teams and has been traded almost more. I think he's been traded more than any other player in the history of the NFL. So it's like,
for first round picks a lot of times too, or second, like high picks. A lot of those, four of those trades, I think, all involved the first.
Yeah, so for me, it was just like, what does the future look like for Dak? And honestly, AR's future looks brighter, and Jared Goff's future looks brighter. Obviously, the extension with Goff in the offseason as well helps that situation as well, because he had the extension after we had this QB ranking originally, and I think that's good because it shows that the team is invested, and that team is young with a lot of young talent, and Goff isn't that old. So it really invested me into being like, okay, the Goff is going to be around for a little while, and this Detroit offense looks very explosive. So no reason for me not to move him up ahead of Dak. And the same thing with AR in Indianapolis. They brought in another receiver. They have Josh Downs that they invested in. They re-signed Michael Pittman to a 3-year deal. So they have the talent there to be able to make this a successful thing and give Richardson every reason to succeed with his talent. So that was my reasoning for moving those guys ahead of Dak in this case.
Oh, I have no issue with you moving those guys ahead of him at all. For me, to me, nothing changed outside of the idea that he might not be a Dallas Cowboy next year, but that also could be a good thing depending on what team picks him up. Maybe. Oh, trying to think of like I mean, maybe it's the Panthers. Maybe Bryce Young has a terrible year, and the Panthers go, you know what? We're gonna bring Dak in now because
with Pepper, you never know. So
right, exactly. I mean, maybe it's the Giants. Maybe the Giants because Daniel Jones and doesn't work out this year, and maybe they bring in Dak just to stick it to the Cowboys. Who knows? I mean, anything can happen. I was surprising. I think where you had Dak the last time and us being so close because I'm usually the one that's a little bit more of a believer in Dak overall. So I'm not surprised. Where you have him now is probably more where I expected you to have him all along. So for you, it probably just finally settled where it probably just should have ended up.
well,
It's fine. And that's how it goes.
well, Go Cowboys mentioned in the chat he wanted to know who was who. I'm going to give you the segue right here. Go Cowboys. As a Commanders fan, I've actually always been higher on Dak, even though he plays for the shit boys. So it's a situation where I like Dak as a quarterback. I do not think I think a lot of the criticism that Dak receives is actually unwarranted, if you want my honest opinion. I just don't feel that he's an elite quarterback. Like, and I know that elite is a terminology that's used way too much for a lot of people, but he's never a guy, in my opinion, that ends up breaking into the top 7, right? And maybe that's what Dallas it needs is a guy that possibly could break into the top 7, and they just haven't found a way to get there. From a fantasy standpoint, he puts up numbers. That's one of the things that I do love about him is he does put up numbers. So that's why I had him ranked higher. It's just now, as far as a dynasty perspective is concerned, when you're drafting these guys, what is Dak's future looking like when Dallas didn't really invest in a lot of the young guys, right? Like they just don't really have much of a, in my opinion, trajectory as a young team with viable Devi assets. Like CeeDee Lamb's being a first round pick. The next person taken off the board is Dak Prescott, and then you're probably not seeing anybody for 6, 7, 8 rounds. Maybe Jake Ferguson slides in there if you're in a tight end premium or whatever league. But that's to me is what's concerning. Is there's none of those guys where you see like Detroit, like even with Jameson Williams kind of having a little bit of like not a very hot start at all, right? But he got on towards the end of the year last year. They expect to use him more. You're seeing Sam Laporta, you're seeing Goff, you're seeing Amon-Ra St. Brown, you're seeing Jahmyr Gibbs. Like you're seeing a slew of Lions going in a round chunk where Dallas is like 1 or 2 guys, and then it's like maybe we'll get a guy late and hopefully he hits. That's my problem.
I don't know that Dallas really ever has done that with Dak. He's put up 2 seasons in the top 5, a third one in the top 8. His worst season was his injury season. He had a 2022. He only played 12 games. So
yep.
Every season where he's really played outside of 2018, where he played 16 games, he only finished as QB 14. He was in the top 10, yep. And within the top 8 otherwise, in general. So, and I don't know that they've really ever had
but how much more
amazing receiving core.
But how much more sustainable is that going to be once you sign Lamb to that contract? That's the key. The salary cap comes into play. If you don't have those rookie contracts that are able to do that, you can't tackle free agency the same way. So now you have to hope you hit on the draft. That's what I'm saying.
Do you go wide receiver next year? I mean, none of us when they drafted CeeDee Lamb, we looked at that wide receiver core and went, "Wow, why are you drafting CeeDee Lamb?" But it really was because we had more belief in the guys that were there than we probably should have. Michael Gallup,
Amari Cooper.
There was somebody else. I think also there at the time. I don't remember who it was, but yeah, we went, wow, that's a weird draft pick to take in the first round. What are you doing? And now look at it. So maybe it's the same thing. Come next year, they draft a guy, and when they end up in the 20s, because CeeDee was around late 18, 19, 20, I think, when he got drafted.
Well, again, it's still though, and maybe Go Cowboys if you're still listening can chime in as a Cowboys fan as to what you think. It's just for me, it's when we're looking at the league, how many times have we seen somebody do that for 4 or 5 years, and then how much longer is that going to be sustainable? Especially
Well,
when you start talking about the salary cap being involved with stuff. How much longer is that going to be sustainable? Now, obviously, if his circumstance changes and his situation changes, and he goes to a different team, that is Seattle's a choice, because that's another one. The Raiders are a possibility.
Raiders,
The Giants, like you said, who seem to be finally trying to put together a team. It makes you just wonder how much it's going to change in that aspect. Now, it may not change at all. It may actually be worse for him, for all we know, because, like I said, Dak does put up numbers in Dallas. I'm not taking that away. It's just I worry about sustainability, and that's the reason why, for me, like I said, I put those two ahead. But I've always liked Dak. I just wanted to make sure I said that. It's just this particular situation, it feels like this year is kind of what's the fork in the road, going to be for him.
Yeah, for sure. So you originally had Dak at 10. You moved him down to where?
Looks like 12, because AR, I think I
12.
put at 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, so I moved him to 12 because I put AR at 10, Goff at 11.
So you moved Purdy to 13 then.
So no.
So you moved Purdy further than that.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Just so I
enter the rookies talk. I should probably just number these real quick, so that way at least I have an idea as to what I'm talking about. Like right now they're just listed. Like
your first rookie comes in at 13.
I will tell you in a second while I'm numbering these. So why don't you go ahead and tell me where your first rookie comes in?
My first rookie came in at 14, and it's Caleb Williams, and that is actually a change in order for me based on pre-draft rookie rankings, and that is mainly because of weapons around said players. Originally, Drake May was my number one quarterback.
Yep.
He got drafted to New England,
yep.
which I'm not saying is a terrible spot anymore because of the system around him like it was with Bill Belichick. But it still is very devoid of proven talent. Now, maybe that means he gets to build with Jalen Polk and
Javon
Baker. Maybe he gets to build with those two guys, and they create this system, and those are your guys, and it works out well. And maybe having Alex Van Pelt there with Ramondre and all that, maybe it's good, but it's too unknown for me to trust fully in Drake May getting the help he needs as a rookie quarterback. I will take the Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, DeAndre Swift, Cole Kmet offense right now and expect that to work out much better. I don't have them like crazy apart. They're 5-spot difference of each other, but Caleb moved into the number one rookie quarterback for me for that reason. They have put so many weapons around that guy to help him succeed, and I hope he does. And I just for him to not succeed would be hard work almost, because that means he's not putting in the work. He's pulling a Jamarcus Russell and just thinking it's going to be easy. So I have belief in the pieces around Caleb Williams more than Drake May.
So I believe in my rookie rankings, it was May, Daniels, Caleb. I think was my top 3. I think I had Caleb at 3.
Yes,
if I remember correctly.
So.
In my rookie ones. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. For me, not much has changed as far as the upside perspective is concerned in those rankings. However, I agree with you that May is no longer my number 1. He is not my first rookie in this one. At number 13, I have Jaden Daniels. Primarily, the one thing that scares me with Jaden Daniels, and this is not because I'm a Commanders fan or whoever just rolled their eyes, I heard it from wherever you are. This is not because I'm a Commanders fan. The one thing that does concern me about Jaden Daniels is still his size. His lower body is very, very skinny. It needs to be he needs to put on a little weight down in the lower regions so his legs aren't being targeted so bad. That is one thing that I am concerned about. However, What I like about this situation is there's no pressure for him to succeed right away. He does not have to come in. They've already said that this is a long-term thing. If they win more than 4 games, I think to them it's going to be a success season for Washington. So he's going to be able to be free and make his mistakes, which then it will be a matter of whether or not he grows from them, right? That's basically what this franchise is telling him. Unlike Caleb Williams, who I already had questions about his head, he is going into a pressure situation. Let's face it, we saw a stat. Eli, thank you for the stat or that little video. It was something ridiculous. Like he only had to average 136 yards in a game. He had to have like I don't even know.
0.65 completions, I believe, or something like that.
Like it was like 65% completion percent. It was ridiculous. All these numbers were really low in order for him to be the most successful Bears rookie quarterback ever. However, that would have been fine if it was last year. This year, they gave him all kinds of weapons to succeed. It was Keenan Allen. DJ Moore returned. It was Rome Odunze coming in. They went out and signed DeAndre Swift. The pressure in Chicago for Caleb Williams to succeed is through the roof. I already had questions about his head. I still have those questions about his head, and I don't know how he's going to handle that pressure. However, he is my number 2 rookie quarterback. He did move ahead of May because of those weapons and because of his talent, and the upside gives him an opportunity and a chance to succeed. It's just like you said, how much work is he going to put into this, right? It's nothing on Drake May. I think Drake May's ceiling is still higher than all 3, like very, very slim margin is still higher than all 3 of them. It's just New England is going through a rebuild process. Again, in those situations, the pressure is actually a little bit higher on May because of the franchise and how successful it's been, and Robert Kraft's desire to win now, right? We saw the short leash on Mac Jones. If May doesn't reach that potential, is it a short leash again on that front? So Caleb does come in at number 2. That was a very long-winded statement to basically say that he comes in at number 2, but Daniels is number 1 for me, and he comes in at 13 ahead of Purdy, just because I think his ceiling is higher than Purdy's overall.
So one thing I'll say about Caleb is he seems to be hanging out with Rome a lot, which I think is great because Rome has not been a guy anybody has ever questioned about his work ethic and putting the work in. So if those two hanging out means Rome is forcing Caleb to do the work, then even better. So Jaden would be my QB2 again for the fact his running aspect compared to Drake puts him there and the team around him.
Mm-hmm.
Jaden has less pressure and better weapons around him than Drake does in New England.
Right. New England is just so young.
It's just, I mean, it's just so many question marks in New England. Mm-hmm. What's the team going to look like? Are they going to be the same style? Is it going to be a new style, a younger style, a fresh approach to football? Is it going to be the same old because it's Jared Mayo and he learned from Bill Belichick? Is it going to be an Antonio Pierce situation where he comes in and it's this like fresh locker room and everybody, because that and Drake May plays well, then he'll move way up in my rankings. It's just right now that is such an unknown scenario up there in New England that I just can't trust it right now until I see on the field, because even though I like Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, also rookies could be terrible. Right. So right now that whole team is just so big of a question mark. Drake May for me falls in at 18 in my rankings. He's actually, like I said, 4 and 5 spots away from the other 2, and there's 2
let me ask you, you put Daniels at you put Caleb at 14. Who was at 13 for you?
I moved Jared Goff up to 13. So Goff originally for me was 15. I moved him up to 13. So he falls in right behind Anthony Richardson. Richardson 13 before was Justin Fields. So Goff took Fields' spot. Fields falls out, and then the rookies come in after that, which pushed Tua down to 16 for me, where I had Tua at 14. So that's kind of where everything kind of fell into place that way.
Two is at 22 for me. Yeah, I got all of it. I just wish that you would have said something when I was talking about Jared Goff before. I mean, you didn't say anything when I was talking about Goff. You just kind of let it go. Like, you didn't tell me you moved him. I had no clue you moved him.
That's fine. I mean, you had Tua at 18 before, so 18 to 22 wasn't a big drop for you. Where you had before.
It's a drop because 3 rookies slated in ahead of him, and then a veteran leapfrogged him.
Yeah. Just the way you said it, you were like, he's at 22. Like, you only had 18 before. It's not like you took him from 12 down to 22. Like
I think you were the highest on Tua. I think you were the highest on Tua between all of us, weren't you?
No. Eli was. He had him at 12, which is not surprising. He's always been the higher one of Tua. I think Eli was higher on Tua coming out, where we were higher on Herbert during that draft class.
Yeah, and then
he had Herbert higher here,
and he also completely forgot about Trevor Lawrence. So
he did do that. Yes,
he didn't even have Trevor Lawrence on his list. So
Fields probably could come out now, so Lawrence could just take his place.
Yeah, Lawrence. Did you have any other movement? Because for me, Caleb slots in at 14. Just so you know, it's only a 1 spot difference between Daniels and Caleb.
So ours are just switched.
Yeah, and no, because
I have them 14, 15.
14, 15, right? Yeah,
but they're just swapped in spots. So
yeah, so I have Drake May at 18 as well.
Okay,
I actually have him behind Murray and Watson right now. That's a little tricky, just because we've seen what Watson can do. Can he get back there with Cleveland? I think Alex Van Pelt being gone is a huge. I don't want to say a huge loss, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how that team adapts to it. Brock Purdy's still at 15 for me. That dropped. I mean, he dropped in that one, but he's down to 15. He didn't drop below Watson or Murray, and Murray at 17. There's no shame. I've never hidden the fact that I've never been a big Murray fan, so it shouldn't surprise anybody that he kind of slid behind a couple of these rookies. But I had a tough time putting May ahead of him because of those reasons. It's a young offense. It's a new offense. And we're just not really sure what to expect from it, right? Like, the pressure in New England to win and win now, does he crack? And May had a lot of pressure at North Carolina, and he played really, really well and answered a lot of it. But there was also some question marks behind it. So I still think he has the highest ceiling in the class overall, personally. And I think he'll be all right. It's just, how long do we have to wait? And will it be too long in New England standards?
And that was the Mac Jones scenario. So you have Watson at 16.
Yeah.
Deshaun Watson at 16 and Kyler Murray at 17, right?
Yeah.
So for those two guys, I do have them back to back. I have them swapped. I have Kyler at 19 and Watson at 20. They slid down again because those rookies, and I did move a veteran ahead of them. So Tua was always ahead of them. Matthew Stafford, for me, moves up ahead of those two guys because I feel like his future got a little clearer, that we're at least probably getting 2 more years out of Matthew Stafford, which for Kyler and Watson is probably the most we can hope for from either one of them right now based on how they've played.
Yep.
Because Kyler's been very injury prone, played well in games when he's out there, but your best asset is being available for your team, and that's something that he's been unavailable quite a bit. He obviously gets the best wide receiver, or one of the best wide receivers in his class, which will help him out. He does not have to worry about having Hollywood Brown over there, which also helps him out. Trey McBride, getting a year older, coming on last year, will help him out. Trey Benson with James Conner, a little bit better of a backfield instead of just relying on old man James Conner to do it all for you. So
right,
it's the idea that Kyler won't have to do it all now, where maybe he can just finally focus on staying in the pocket, move when you need to, like a Russell Wilson, and avoid taking so many hits.
Yeah, Kyler for me stays just behind Watson, just because I think Watson, I don't want to say has hit his ceiling, but I think we've seen a preview for his ceiling I think there is a possibility that he could do more. It's just, is he in football? Right? It goes back to the mentality aspect of it. Is he there? Whereas Kyler, I feel like we've already seen what Kyler can do. We're not going to see much more. I know that he's getting more weapons, and I know that there's things around him that he doesn't have to do it all, et cetera, et cetera. It's just, I've never been that guy on Murray to go, yeah, this guy is definitely a franchise QB who could be a top 2 or 3 quarterback. I've never been that guy. So it'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward with him, because obviously that contract is huge. He's going to be the starter in there. They're brought in pieces around him. For me, Matthew Stafford, I thought moved up a spot because he did leapfrog somebody, but he actually dropped a spot because of the rookies that were added in. Stafford dropped to 21 because of the 3 rookies that are ahead of him, but he did leapfrog Tua. I did not put him ahead of Bryce Young just for age purposes. I think Stafford's a better quarterback than Young, and I would draft Stafford ahead of Young. It's just my rankings across the board. It's Stafford is, his age is still a worry for me. I know that he's not looking to retire right now or whatever, but Aaron Donald for 3 years toyed with it, and then eventually just in the offseason was like, "Hey, I'm done." Like, so you never know. Bryce could end up being an absolute failure and drop off this list by friggin'.
So before we move on to
September.
Bryce Young, let's talk about Tua, because I have Tua at 16. You have him at 22.
Yep.
Um,
Just coming off the
Tua-
Stafford train, you're just going to completely just change it on me. I'm just sitting here talking about Stafford. You mentioned Stafford, and then
Stafford is Stafford. Everybody knows who Stafford is. You're drafting Stafford with the idea that he's
everybody knows.
QB
Everybody knows
2,
who Oatmeal
3,
Brain
13.
is too.
But what I want to say about Tua is, early you brought up Trevor Lawrence talking about the contract. Does it change anything for you? No, I always expected him to get a contract extension with Jacksonville. I did not expect him to move on. Tua is different, though. If Tua receives a contract extension, I think, because he hasn't yet, right?
I don't think
not one of.
I don't think he's.
He's one of the ones that is waiting for one, I believe. Still,
I think so.
So, if he were to receive one, then it would at least show a belief in Miami that they believe he is their quarterback. They put a lot of weapons around him.
Yeah.
He has, and at times last season, he looked amazing. And then they played a good team and he looked terrible.
I was just going to say, the issue is just he doesn't show up in games against teams that, one win against a team with winning record in 2 years. I know that's not all on him, but at some point in time, you have to look at the quarterback and be like, what are you doing? Like, how come you can't win against teams with winning records?
I agree. And that's why he falls in at 16, because if it wasn't for that, Tua has the tools, the playmakers to be a much higher spot in this list. It's just really, can you consistently show up week in and week out? The difference between Tua and people like Herbert is literally, Herbert pretty much is consistent. He may not be this winner that we all wish he is, and part of that, I think, was his coaching before.
Yeah, for sure.
But he, at least as a fantasy quarterback, put you points. You didn't have to really worry about Herbert getting you points. Tua, you don't know from week to week. You can't start him every week. You look at the matchup and go, oh, that's not a good matchup. We better take Tua out. To be a top 7, 8 quarterback in fantasy, you have to be just, I can put you out there and not worry about it. I can put you in my starting lineup and I don't have to worry about it. And the only one probably right now is Trevor Lawrence in there, and just because he's had such roller coaster type games himself, part of that coaching, part of that, his overdoing it, but he's been more consistent than even Tua has. But if Tua can get a contract and maybe, maybe even in himself gets reassurance that, okay, I am the guy, I am their guy, then he can move up this list. But that's why I have him at 16 and why the rookies go in ahead of him. I'm not going to argue that 22 is the wrong spot for him, because I'm not a huge Tua guy. I don't sit here and go, Tua is the best quarterback. He's amazing. I have belief with the weapons around him that he at least can be semi-good fantasy quarterback.
Yeah.
Better. I like him better than Kyler Murray. Let me just put it that way. I'll take Tua over Kyler.
I mean, to me, they're all
saying
they're all very close to being in the same boat. To be honest with you, it's just a couple of these
they-
guys. Like I have in between Murray and Stafford / Tua, because Tua's at 22, Stafford's at 21, and
and
Murray's
May
at
at 18. Who's
I
your
had-
19 and 20?
19's Baker, and
Okay.
20 is Bryce Young. But you know, anybody in between there, with the exception of Young, just because we don't really know what we're getting with Young. So, you know, May, Baker, Stafford could easily leapfrog a guy like Murray, and Murray could easily slide down here into Tua because,
Same
to
with
me,
Watson.
yeah,
Let me
and,
just be real. Same with Watson.
and the same with Watson, because honestly, those two guys are probably got one foot in the same canoe that Tua's, you know, being the captain of at this point in time for me. You know, Baker at 19, I think I had him at 19 originally, but he leapfrogged, I think. No, maybe I don't remember.
You had him at 19, yeah. You had him at 19.
But he passed Tua because Tua dropped down. But
Correct.
the rookies pushed him down and kept him at 19. Baker's a guy that I still really, really like, though. I actually like him better than Watson. I like him better than Watson and Murray. He's a guy that I would draft ahead of Watson and Murray if I was looking at a board. I just know that I'm going to get better value with him in comparison to Watson and Murray, so I can wait on him. Like, I don't have to go out of my way and draft him. But if I'm looking at Watson and Murray in the, let's say, 5th round, and I know I can get Baker in the 6th or 7th, I'm passing on Watson and Murray 10 out of 10 times. So that's just where I'm at with him. It's just, for me, Baker, when I had him at 19 originally, it was what is this offense going to look like? You know,
well, and that was pre-contract.
Right. Well, it wasn't pre-contract. He had just signed the contract, but we still didn't know.
I don't think so. I don't think he had
was
a
it earlier
at
than that?
point.
Oh, well, yeah. Oh, that's right. No, it was pre-contract because we were discussing whether or not he was going to sign. We all expected him to resign, but
correct.
So, but he stays at 19 just because the 3 rookies slot in ahead of him. If those 3 rookies weren't there, I would probably have Baker up higher. So
you had Bryce ahead of him before, and he falls spots behind him now, so you know he wouldn't slide up.
Yeah, I got Bryce at 20, and then obviously there should be no surprise. JJ and Bo Nix come in at 23 and 24 for me.
They are also my 23 and 24, but where you have Bryce Young in your top 24, I don't.
Right.
Kirk Cousins would be the other one that I have that you don't. I have Baker at 21 behind Kyler and Watson, but again, I had Stafford and Tua up higher than you did. So Baker comes in at 21 for me. He was 18, but again, that's pushed down by 3 quarterbacks. So literally 3 push him down to 21.
My
20
contract. And my 25 would be Cousins if we did top 25, just so you know. It was just, for me, the reason I left him off was because we just didn't know what the hell was going to happen with him, where he was going to go. The Achilles injury, I know it doesn't really necessarily affect a quarterback as much, but I just didn't feel that him going to Atlanta necessarily changed a ton long term for me. I know he signed that 4-year deal, but it just again, Cousins is like Baker. I think he's going to be. I think I think he's mainly going to be overdrafted. But if you could you get him in a spot, I would draft him over some of the guys that are on my list. So sorry, I just wanted to mention that about Cousins real quick. That's all.
The only reason JJ and Bo fall in behind Kirk is just neither one of them are guaranteed to be the starter.
Correct.
Day one or the season at all. Both of them are Bo I think has a better chance than JJ to start this season.
Yeah.
In Denver. Unless Sam Darnold plays like the old Sam Darnold, I can very much see Sam Darnold holding that job down for most of the season, especially with that team around him. I think Sam is more prepared to be a win now quarterback for them than JJ is. JJ, I think, would benefit from a year sitting, but it all depends on Sam Darnold. And I mean, if we were doing a redraft ranking, Sam Darnold would be ahead of those guys because I expect him to be the starter.
Yeah, though I had JJ at 23 and Bo Nix at 24 ahead of Cousins just because of youth, and a little clearer picture as to.
For you, it's Bryce Young.
Well, it's primarily Bryce Young, and Bryce Young again was youth. I mean, that's
Yeah.
primarily the reason why I had him ahead of Cousins was just the youth factor. Uh, I know it's weird saying that when Stafford's on this list, but Stafford's just a better quarterback than Cousins. So for me, it was
Yes.
just a matter of which one am I going to put on this list? Which one's going to stay off of this list? And Stafford to me is a better, is a better quarterback. But don't make no mistake about it. Kirk Cousins is going to be a guy who's going to hover around that 10, 11, 12 range. He normally does. And that's what you're going to get with him. That's basically what his ceiling is. I think he's had a couple of eights in there, but
Yeah.
overall he's in that 10, 11, 12 range. So Cousins is not a terrible quarterback to take. It's just long-term dynasty aspect of it. I don't want him.
You get 2 years. I think it's really 2 years. I think that's what you're gonna get. And for Stafford, maybe the same. For Baker, maybe the same. For Watson, maybe. But it's kind of we kind of know it's 2 years, unless this
Right.
team is like NFC Championship game this year, Super Bowl the following year. He's probably
Right.
gone after 2 years.
Yeah,
so,
most likely. Yeah.
So you kind of know it with Kirk. So I could totally, if you're building your team and you've already drafted maybe Stafford, you took him as your QB2. I don't want Kirk as my QB3. I would
Correct.
much rather have even a Bryce Young at that point
Right.
for the youth side of things, knowing at least Bryce has probably this year, most likely 2 years on that team. For me, Bryce Young falls out. I mean, he's behind a Will Levis and a Derek Carr for me at this point. Still, I have to see it from him. I didn't believe him coming out. Size, the offense he was in, his type of play.
Right.
He did nothing last year to prove it on a bad team. I get that, and I totally understand all that. A much better coaching staff, but we'll see. I mean, their owner is still the owner. But Bryce has to prove it. They've given him weapons. They've got him a really good running back. They've put multiple wide receivers around him. So it really, Bryce has to prove it. And if this year looks, he doesn't have to look as good as Trevor Lawrence did in his year too. But like if he gets 75% of that, then he'll fly up this list ahead of a lot of these older players and stuff and things like that. It's just show me.
And make no mistake about it too, the NFC South is a division that anybody can win. Like if you play at a good level, the NFC South at this particular moment in time there's no guaranteed front runner. The Buccaneers won it last year, but that very well could, 9-8, and that very
9-8.
And that very well could be Atlanta this year, or it could be Carolina, or it could be New Orleans.
Like,
all four of these teams are very, very close. It's just coaching and playmaking. And if Bryce Young doesn't take that step, then it's never going to happen because these other teams are going to surpass you so far that it's going to be over for Young. Like
I totally expected us to have a top 5 pick.
You did. I remember we talked about that. You did. You did.
Totally expected having a toe. I mean part of that was because of the NFC South being worse last year than was expected. Atlanta was supposed to be better than it was. New Orleans was supposed to be better than it was. Carolina was but it was just we beat Minnesota. The first game of the year. I mean, I didn't expect that to happen. We beat Minnesota. I think in game 2 we beat somebody we weren't supposed to beat. Like we were off to a good start. Then we got a little cold. Then we got hot again. So, I mean, we made it all the way to almost beating Detroit in that divisional round. So
honestly, you probably should have. It was just a couple things that just didn't fall your way, and Detroit capitalized on it.
Yeah, they were the better team. They made the plays that needed to be made.
Right.
But we were winning with them. We didn't get blown out. I mean, I was very worried about playing the Eagles. We blew them out. I mean, they imploded, but
they completely imploded.
So for Bryce, show me what you can do. I mean, I have less faith in Bryce Young than I do Bo Nix at this point.
Do you have less faith in Bryce Young than Zach Wilson? Wow, he hesitated. I did not expect the hesitation.
It's
there.
Close.
Holy crap.
It's close.
I did not expect that. I don't have as much less faith in Bryce Young as you do. I am not a Bryce Young guy, though. I mentioned it numerous times that I would take CJ Stroud over him all day, every day, and that had nothing to do with Stroud's season last year. If anybody wants to go back and take a look at the Dynasty Academy dialogue, I was saying him coming out last year. I think I had Stroud as my number one the whole way. Um, for me, it's just I think he's young, and I think with the right coaching staff around him, I think he can make huge strides and huge improvements. It's just it's David Tepper that really just worries me down there in Charlotte or wherever the hell they play, because it's yeah because that that ownership I saw it with fucking Daniel Snyder for however many years. I know what it's like, and we saw it with Al Davis at the end of his tenure with the Raiders. Like when you have owners that are so temperamental and make decisions on the fly like that, you just never know what's going to happen. Now, they did bring in some good pieces. Xavier Legette, I think, is going to be a legit wide receiver in this league. He has the size, he has the speed, he has the ability. Jonathan Mingo, I still think is okay. I think he's going to be fine. They'll probably play him from the slot, which is where he spent most of his time at Mississippi. So I think that there's a good opportunity and chance that Mingo will succeed. Thielen being older, I think is a good mentor for both these guys.
Yep.
As long as he takes that,
he's a worker.
He's a worker.
He can.
As long as he shows them, yeah.
Showed up for a workout and has been one of the best wide receivers since then.
And he had a good year last year too, despite everything. His year was not terrible last year.
Well, a lot of catches. Well, a lot of catches.
Low
yardage, but a lot of catches.
I was going to say they only went for 5 yards, but there was a lot of catches. So
a lot of catches.
But he still had a good year overall for them last year as far as what that offense looked like. So there's pieces around him. I think Carolina has at least an idea as to what they want to help Bryce. They didn't go. He did go over 1,000. They didn't go as, but I think his yards per catch was like 7. Yeah.
103 receptions.
Yeah, 103 receptions.
I didn't think he actually made it over 1,000 yards.
Yeah, he did go over 1,000. What was it? 6 touchdowns?
4.
4. Okay, I couldn't remember. Well, did he have? No, he didn't. No, maybe there were 2-point conversions. Anyways, regardless, he had a good rushing. He had a good year for him across the board. So I think they're okay. It's just hopefully the coaching staff that they brought in, Canellis, is a guy that can correct this ship, at least head it in the right direction, so he gets longer than a year. Because we discussed that hiring, like it was like it felt like a very much like a scapegoat hiring, And for Bryce, his development is going to come from Canellis, because Canellis revived several careers, and now the opportunity and chances to, in a weird thing to say, revive a career coming in a second-year guy in Bryce Young.
Maybe.
Or that's what I mean. Like, that's why I said it's weird to say it. Like, it's a second-year player. And that's the other thing about Bryce, is he's young. So hopefully the coaching will help, and maybe the game will slow down for him a little bit, and it won't be as piss poor. Carolina is similar to Washington. There's really no pressure this year. It really has to be just go out and play ball and have fun. Because if you don't, you're going to end up with the first overall pick again. And Bryce, that might be the end of you. So don't let that happen.
I was gonna say it's more pressure than Washington for Bryce Young. The team as a whole,
right?
No, but for Bryce, way more pressure than Jaden has, and that's just because of you took the guy who number 1 overall. His counterpart who went 2 is playing way better. His other counterpart who went 3 got injured last year, but looked better at least in the 4 games he played in. So you're gonna get analyzed based on who you got drafted around. So you have to do something. I don't need Bryce Young to go out there and be the number 1 quarterback, but you gotta be better than.
Did he even throw for 3,000 last year?
You gotta be better than 2,877 yards. 11 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. You got to be better than that.
Yeah.
So if you can get 3,500 yards, bring those touchdowns up to 20, INTs maybe down to 7, 8, 9, even 10, 20, 10 for a second-year player who's working to get better. Not a terrible stat line, and I would look at that as a much improvement.
Yeah.
For him.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one of the biggest things when discussing these quarterbacks in general, is the NFL gives them such a short leash. It's hard for us, not just as fantasy players. As fantasy players, it's hard for us to really gauge what this future is going to look like because, Bryce having that year last year, look at what we're talking about now. A revival of his career, even though he's in his second year. It was the same thing with Trevor Lawrence after his Urban Meyer disaster. There was a lot of talk about this guy's a bust. And it's like, guys, like we got to show patience in the dynasty, but it's hard to show patience from a fantasy perspective when the NFL doesn't show patience, right?
Yep.
That's the key, right? We talked about Josh Allen.
Mac Jones.
Josh Allen. We talked about but we talked about Josh Allen. Like if he had been to anywhere else other than Buffalo, there was a chance that would have been over before he actually hit the point. And now we're talking about him being the first overall pick in every startup draft. And
it's not even like that Buffalo was doing something wonderful for him. They just allowed him to grow.
Yeah.
It's not like they had this wonderful quarterback streak going that it was like, oh, well, our stuff works. No, you were terrible with quarterbacks before him. You just allowed a kid who was raw to figure it out, and he figured it out.
And he did.
You gave him the tools to help. You helped him, and you allowed him to grow with the help that you were providing him. So
yeah. And I know that they haven't gotten there in the playoffs aspect of things, but he still got you to the playoffs where you weren't even sniffing before that. So
only one team can win. I think as NFL fans as a whole, we have to remember that every year only one team will win the Super Bowl.
Out of 32.
The Super Bowl champion, out of 32. Being the Super Bowl champion is very hard to do.
Yeah.
Especially when you have to play Patrick Mahomes for the next 10 years.
And probably the greatest and probably one of the greatest coaches, if not the greatest coach to ever coach the game, in Andy Reid. So I mean it's very tough. All right. We got to wrap this up. This is towards the end of our show. We were going to do something else. I don't remember what it was, but whatever. I mean, we don't have time to do it now, but we'll have to catch up onto it next week. For you new viewers out there, thank you for the people that have turned in and stayed in and listened to us, jamber about quarterbacks for the last hour. This show is usually 8 p.m. Eastern every Thursday. Tonight was a little bit of a late start, so thankfully, everybody tuned in. By all means, hit the comments. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know if we're idiots. I mean, I already know I am, but maybe you agree with something that Mark says. He usually thinks like me, so he's probably an idiot. But still, if you think we are, say something. By all means. We love to discuss it. Give us your trades as well. Hit us our trades. Dynasty Academy, there's a 3 in the E on Twitter or X, whatever the hell you want to call it. Hit them up in the DMs or tag us if you want to talk about trades. We'll put it on the show and discuss that as well moving forward. Anything that you have, thoughts, by all means. We love talking football. We love talking fantasy. We do it every day in the chat. So seriously, just if you want to chime in on the conversation, have your stuff brought up here for the Huddle Sports Network and the Shady Sports Network. Just hit us up. I'm Michael Washington, aka Chewbacca 77 on Sleeper. He's Mark Onks, aka Onksty11. Is it 11?
Mm-hmm.
It's 11.
Yep, 11.
Yeah. Onksty11 on Sleeper. And until then, have a good night.
This is a Huddle Sports Network broadcast. You can find us on Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, Facebook, and of course YouTube. Get all your NFL news here first.